Hey, Dan, thanks for joining us.
Oh, great to be here, guys. Don, hey, Aaron.
Mate, it's great to see you again. I think the last time we were down, it's got to be 6 months ago now.
Yeah, it would be. Wow, that's gone fast.
Yes, yeah, correct.
And where Dan and I met first, I think, was a small version of West Tech Fest, but it was focused on the investors down at Margaret River. Laney and I went down for an investor weekend and we all stayed at those awesome houses on the beach and probably ate too much, drank too much and told too many lies. That's my recollection.
That was my recollection as well, Don. And I got to admit, it was pretty memorable, mate, because I've never had an experience like that at all in my whole entire lifetime here at WeMoney or even beforehand. And glad that it packed down there and made a contribution here to WA, mate. So it was an awesome trip and it was so good to meet you in Lane.
Yeah, no, it was great. And big shout out to Paula and the West Tech team and meeting Carly Norman and people of the ecosystem down there. It was just such a great event. And I think it's those kinds of events that bring ecosystems together. And as I was saying just before, Aaron and I were probably the only losers in the investment ecosystem not to go to West Tech Fest this week, not this week, a couple of weeks ago. But with my family situation and Aaron moving around, we just couldn't make it work. But we will be there next year.
Yeah.
No, look forward to seeing you guys there.
Was it a good session? A good session this year?
It was fantastic. It's picking up and put this into context. Something that became a found all the way back in 2012. To see the ecosystem, especially in Western Australia, get to the point where you get, VCs flying from all places in Australia, in the world in some cases, to come down and spend floors and those together. A bit of a bummer this year. We didn't get to Toronto, but apparently they had another session by the beach, which was just as good. And they had an informal get together at the Roto. So that was really good.
I was really keen to do this. Tribe's a B2B focused VC, but we try and play broadly in the ecosystem. And I think it's important that I think B2C and with you've got some B2B2C attributes that really put what you do in our wheelhouse. But even if it was only B2C, I think B2C can learn from B2B and B2B learn from B2C and getting some good sharing there. So maybe what is WeMoney? Where did the idea come from and what's the problem that it solves?
What is WeMoney? WeMoney is the core essence. The problem that we're really trying to solve is that if you look at the relationship that people have with money today, we think that the problem is actually much bigger than what people realize. The key sort of insight that we saw before we started WeMoney is that as soon as you turn age 30, most people have about $28,000 for what they call non-mortgage debt. So this is credit cards, personal loans, buy now, pay later. And that stops people from achieving life goals, like buying a home, starting a family, because they're trapped with this debt load for a very long period of time. But it often starts much earlier. We all know the story, and perhaps friendly, perhaps it's happened to us. But as soon as you graduate from high school, get your first job, you experience a paycheck for the very first time. Your friends invite you to a getaway out to Europe. You don't have the money to go and fund that. And then you jump online, you apply for a credit card or two, and you think that credit card is only going to be used for a trip, but it ultimately gets recycled for other purposes much later on in life. And that's where typically a lot of the debt problems come across for a lot of young people. And that can materialize some pretty bad outcomes. And the way that WeMoney solves it today is essentially there's four main pillars to WeMoney. You can come and connect your whole entire financial life to the platform, see where your money is going, track your budgets, monitor your entire net worth, and make that process very simple to understand your finances. The second thing is the credit score unlock. So we offer you the ability to track a lot of your credit score. So what a lot of people don't know, especially our younger members, is that your credit score is increasingly becoming the lifeblood of your financial profile. And Australia is moving into an American-style credit scoring system, where in America, your credit score is listed on your dating profile. It's involved in pre-employment checks. And there was a piece of legislation in Australia that really made the reporting of more credit data available all the way back in 2018. And so we saw that trend, and we saw that Australia is going to move into a market where essentially, if you've got a low credit score, you're going to be given an interest rate that is much higher than, say, somebody with a great credit score. So pricing discrimination.
If at all.
Correct, if at all. Correct,
they
yes.
just reject you.
That's correct, yeah. And so we feel like there's an important part that WeMoney can play to really improve and make it simple to understand your credit score profile and how it interacts with your day-to-day banking. Then thirdly is WeMoney, which is this sense of community and purpose where individual members can share their stories about money. So if you're a person that is in a situation where you've got a lot of credit card debt, you'll be able to hear from stories from other people. Like one of the members, Emily, who had $50,000 worth of credit card debt, paid it off in 3 years' time, became debt free. And a lot of people, when they're in those situations where they feel like they're alone, there's a high degree of shame, high degree of guilt about their own situation, and a feeling of despair. And what we saw is that rather than keep all these topics in the shadows, you'd actually illuminate them to say that, number one, you're not alone. And number two, here's some other people that have gone through that. And number three, they look exactly like you, right? They're not professionals with suits and ties on a TV commercial. They're just everyday, regular, hardworking Australians that have chosen as one of their ultimate goals is to become debt free. And that inspires then more people to understand, hang on a second, I look like Emily now. And that inspires me to help get better with my money and my finances. And talking lastly is that the other big problem that we see in the Australian market at the moment, probably more on the monetization side and the way that we can help our members save a lot of money, is that we estimate that somewhere to the tune of around 75 to 85% of people are overpaying on financial products. And that has been backed up by some research that we've done internally, where it's simply, if you just plot what your credit score is to what average interest rate you're paying, it's all over the place, where you've got people with 1,000, what we call credit unicorns, with 1,000 plus credit scores, paying 20% on personal loans when they could be actually achieving a rate of 6%. So there's a massive dislocation in the personal credit market, where essentially supply and demand don't meet efficiently, where people are credit excluded, but also people that have got credit products actually overpaying on that relative to their own credit health. So if we solve that problem, then essentially we estimate, you get back of the envelope calculation, this is not accurate at all, but it could save somewhere to the tune of around sort of $150 to $250 billion of either excess interest that is paid on products, but also missed interest accrued on deposit products, because we all have bank accounts that have got 0% interest that they yield on. And if people were to have a look at a $10,000 balance, they could be earning some money on that or ordinarily foregoes. Yeah, that's ultimately the two problems that we want to solve, is helping people get out of debt as quick as they can, and helping them live a better, more prosperous financial life. And secondly, fixing up this massive dislocation in the personal credit space.
That's really awesome. And I love hearing that vision. It's really good to hear the genesis story of how that started. And I think last number I saw, you had something like 350,000 downloads of the app. Is that number about right?
We're just about to break 600,000. So
Wow.
yeah, 600,000 in just a little over 3 years.
So good.
Well done. And everything you described there, like that, I love the aspirational aspect of it, and I have a ton of questions on the banking side of that, which I'd love to get to, but rewind a little. So going back to the start, how did you actually kick this off? What was the first version and how did you go to market?
Yeah, that's a good question, Aaron. I mean, I think the genesis story actually starts way earlier than that. And it actually starts off with my upbringing and my childhood, because I think that's where a lot of things that a lot of founders work on probably stem from. People probably heard me say this 1,000 times, but this might be a new audience. But essentially, what brought me to this topic is my parents were immigrants to Australia, came in the late 80s, didn't have two brass kangaroos to rub together, did it tough, like 15 odd years, grew up in a very sort of food insecure environment. And mum, to all her credit, became an entrepreneur when we were about 7 to 8 years old in the property space, and essentially took us up the socioeconomic ladder to a point where we could have all the things that you would normally sort of expect in life. And I think for me, that had just such a profound impact, because I think about that, my early part of my life, almost every single day, in terms of seeing my friends who today are probably not doing probably the best that they could from my sort of early childhood. And it's because that petri dish and that environment where they were in basically habituated this financial inequality, because they were so worried about making ends meet every single day. They couldn't think about, hey, educational prospects or anything like that, because money was such a charge in their life. And as I got a bit older, I connected the dots sort of moving backwards in time. But that kind of really is the core genesis of WeMoney. I registered the domain name all the way back in 2014. So like this, I was waking up in night sweats just thinking about this. And every single part of my career after that, 3 years in banking, being at the front lines with consumers, 5 years in a mortgage startup, 3 years in post-acquisition of the first business that we had into a debt recovery company, where you could hear these stories of people going through horrific financial mistakes. a bit of a detour to academia to study behavioral science and economics. But at the end of the day, that was really what brought us to WeMoney, is that the entire industry is focused on the ones and zeros, the UI, but what they're absolutely ignoring, we feel, is that money is not about the money itself. It's the core fundamental human drivers of emotions, needs, and wants. And technology kind of gets in the way of that sometimes. And we just feel like there needs to be a platform or a solution that kind of really gets to the core, the essence of people's desires around what they want to achieve with their money. And then what can we do as WeMoney to abstract as much of that problem and mental capacity and thinking about the topic of money, where they can focus on living their lives and less about the technology itself. Because there's, as you guys know, problems to solve where you abstract away the complexity behind the scenes and you just provide the solution. And so that's what we feel is a big opportunity in front of us, is to make that topic of money effortless and automated. And yeah, that's where it was born from.
And that's why I wanted to get you on the podcast from our prior discussions, because you're just building more than an app. It's not just an app that people go and build. You've got this deep fundamental understanding of a culture and climate that can perpetuate people's behaviors that don't serve them. And I think people don't understand the consequence often of those short-term decisions. And then it doesn't really matter how they got into that situation. There's rarely any support to get them out of the situation. And that, to me, is where your passion lies of, okay, you're in this shitty situation, no judgment, no any of that stuff.
No, the funny thing is that if you're the gifted 20% of the population that's either an accountant or an engineer, you would look at somebody not being able to manage their money and think they have two heads, because people have different ways of processing different information and data. And where we take the approach is that rather than coming from a place of judgment, which shouldn't be there, it's how do you help those individuals really illuminate the situation they're currently in and provide them a pathway to get out of it. Because everybody can tell them, hey, you need to get better with managing your money. Your mum and dad will reinforce that. School systems will enforce that. Financial education literacy programs will enforce that. But if you look at the evidence over the last 30 odd years, all the longitudinal studies that tell us is that the more information you give people, the less likely they are to retain it and act on it. And so there must be something else there. And that's what we're tapping into. That's something else, which is core human decision-making around avoiding bad money mistakes and being more conscious and mindful about how we make decisions. Yeah, that's what I'm.
I love that focus that you've got there, is that you're trying to create almost avatars of people that look like other people. And those people are often surprised to learn that the issue they've got, others have. And I think that is a lesson for all types of business in your communication and branding, is that people tend to engage when they hear or see people that look and smell like them, same problem, seeking a solution. Whereas sometimes what happens is some brands try and be really aspirational of trying to sell some big magical outcome, but your average person looks at it and says, that's not me and that's never going to be me, so therefore I don't engage. Whereas meeting people on the level that they're at is just so important.
John, the last thing I'll throw about is that there's a generational schism that's occurring that very few people in the sort of industry are aware about, is that Gen Z millennials, those 18 to 40 years old, have got a completely different mental model about the world than, say, X's and Boomers do. And every time we speak to anybody, even in the sort of investment community, the relatability of the problems and ideas and the mental model of the youth of today are completely and utterly different. They're diet of media, number one. They're not watching linear TV anymore. They're consuming all their information, and the modality of how they consume that information on TikTok and very sort of short-term ephemeral content is actually how they learn. That's why money talk on TikTok is huge, because that's a medium that people expect to sort of learn from these days, as opposed to reading sort of books and things like that. Yeah, it's a really interesting problem.
Just on that, so what are the channels that you are finding most effective in terms of reaching your target customers?
So we took a very purposeful approach building WeMoney, because if you just think about any D2C categories today, who takes the majority of the rent, as it were, right? It's Cupertino, it's Google,
Yep.
Facebook, Apple.
It's often said when a startup raises money, the investor should just write a check of 60% of that to Google, Facebook,
AWS.
whoever, and just be done with it. Yeah.
Yeah, correct, 100%. And so I think we hear that coming into it. And also this category is in a graveyard. 95% of the businesses don't work, and they don't work for some core fundamental reasons, which in a B2C context or even a B2B context are the same, which is a CAC to sort of LTV sort of ratios. We knew that before we started, is that you can't grow this business or help grow WeMoney purely on paid, because that way you're always going to be compressing your margins and getting to scale. I mean, paid is a contributing component to our growth. But what we did very early on, and this goes to the launch story, the question you asked earlier, Aaron and Don, is that what we did is we developed a community of 5,000 people, all on Instagram. So if you go to Instagram today, you'll see people talking about their money, their finances, taking screenshots of their superannuation balance and things like that. It's called the sort of Aussie DeFi community. And we developed an audience to begin with, and then actually co-created the first initial features of that community. And so today you have these raging fans of WeMoney that are the evangelists and hyper users that go and promote this brand and message to a lot of people. And so we've been very conscious that because we're a community-based platform, engaging a community and letting those people, if they feel passionate and aligned to what we're doing, to help promote that message. So right now, between 50 and 60% of all of our entire acquisition comes from organic word of mouth.
Yeah, wow. And yeah, for other founders out there listening, what are the metrics that you're personally monitoring on a regular basis? You mentioned there that virality, the referral aspect. But what else are you looking at as your own measure of company growth and success?
Yeah, you should back to the team probably ask that question of the metrics that we measure, because I think like right now I've got 2 screens here, and we've developed customized dashboards for essentially every single part of our business. What you don't measure, you can't manage. And what we've realized is that there's certain metrics that you can measure in a business, and there's certain metrics that you hear about on podcasts or, newsletters, but every business has their own unique, nuanced metrics that are super important. And I remember actually a podcast recently with Jeff Bezos, where he talked about if you start measuring a metric in a business, let's say like user growth, but user growth at what cost? What type of members are you attracting? Are they the profile of the consumers that you can really help? Which one of your consumers are using what particular feature? When are they using it? For us, we pretty much monitor everything, but the ones that really matter the most, it all comes down to the P equals MC squared for us, which is the most fundamental metric, which is CAC to LTV. If you don't have a CAC to LTV, where the CAC is lower than your LTV, you don't have a business. And that's the thing that we are laser focused on.
And a lot of investors and founders have found that out post the 2021, 2022 era, where expenditure hid all of that. And one of the challenges some people have is calculating their CAC. How do you calculate it? What goes into the CAC bucket and what doesn't?
So we use a blended CAC formula because that's probably the most appropriate, because we have such a high organic attribution rate. And so it's basically everything on the paid marketing line, just to be calculated as a CAC. We're 14, so we're not at the stage yet where it's bundling all the other sort of costs, but all the paid channel spend that essentially gets aggregated into the CAC line. And then I think for LTV is pretty simple for us. Essentially, it's the amount of revenue that you generate. The thing that we focused on very early is doing direct user attribution to revenue. So we can go back down to the individual member profile and attribute a revenue source and event. Because what that then does is it gives you this power to say, okay, you've got a different subset of users, some are generating revenue more than others, then what's the opportunity to go and actually double down on a particular cohort that's emerging, rather than just having, hey, I made $50,000 this month, but where did that $50,000 come from? So after composition of the revenue is actually very critical. And we've got a few different product lines on how we make revenue. So the first one being is that we help our members identify opportunities to save money. Typically, the amounts of savings where they're paying 25% of revenue just on a credit card, we help them identify an opportunity to get down to say as low as 6% in some cases. So we get paid a referral fee from our partners for that process. But we also this year launched a pro subscription platform called WeMoney Pro, which gives you more features and benefits and allows more customization, which is a different revenue dynamic because it operates more of a SaaS framework instead of a pure sort of marketplace with the normal model, if that makes sense.
So that's the revenue model. You've got a multi-channel revenue model. Some is that channel rebate, some is the pro product. Is that how the thing washes its face? Because I believe you've been one of the few companies to reach EBITDA break even out of in the last little while.
Yeah, it's great. There probably are two big areas of focus and contributors currently, and we don't know it all yet. But our ultimate goal is that the problem in the personal credit market needs to be streamlined for more people, because the way it works today, we call the old era, call it like sort of comparison 1.0. You come to a comparison website, they know you, Don and Aaron as an IP address.
Yeah.
But they don't know about you, your goals, your aspirations, how you're feeling about your own personal finance thing that you want to achieve. So we think there's a big opportunity to streamline a lot of that back-end process for consumers to make it way easier to procure savings. And the thing that I probably didn't discuss left out at the start of the introduction is that WeMoney is a open banking accredited organisation at the unrestricted level, and we're one of what we believe is the largest aggregators of open banking data for a C2C brand in Australia currently.
And even with that open banking integration, given the benefits that you're flowing through to your end users and the economic savings you're generating for them, have you hit any friction from the banks or financial institutions at all? Has that manifested in a way where they don't want these savings to actually be carried through or anything like that?
I think earlier you said saving 120 billion in interest, and I thought, oh God, there's a banker there that's going to lose his bonus.
Yeah, that's where my head went.
Yeah, look, I think over time, I think any sort of industry that goes through massive, I fundamentally, utterly believe that open banking is one of the most important pieces of digital infrastructure that Australia is embarking on, and for a couple of reasons. The analogy I like to use is actually to go back to the late 90s, where the airline industry and the hotel industry essentially were disrupted to a certain extent, where essentially you have one company like Uber that provide all the data, inventory collection, a lot of rooms and hotels and flights, and that spawned obviously Expedia, What If, lastminute.com. I mean, if you think about open banking, its core fundamental, it's unlocking consumers' data so they can make a choice around, hey, if I think I could be achieving a better interest rate in a product or generating more savings, I should be able to very quickly and easily move to that product and service and save a lot of money. And so I think there is a bit of tension for that naturally, because no bank or no financial institution probably wants to lose a customer. But I think the Australian government has taken a very, very sort of firm view in terms of their open banking and the vision of open banking in Australia that allows companies like WeMoney to participate, unlock that consumer surplus. And we think it's a matter of when, not if, that will happen. So there's plenty of issues, obviously, with the current implementation with open banking, but that will be resolved. And our time horizon is not 2 years. Our time horizon is 7 to 10 years before this gets to maturity and becomes a massive part of the financial infrastructure of Australia.
It's pretty phenomenal. Like, just seeing the number of companies that are now building off that. Like, to your point, it really feels like an inflection point for fintechs to enable, to build off that. But how does that translate for you then going internationally? Like, looking at other markets, are there equivalent systems out there? And what does that look like for you entering those different markets?
Yeah, so number one, we have got an ambition to go international, but I think what we just realized in the last sort of year and a bit is that the Australian opportunity is just big because of the problem set, and internationalizing an organization that is highly complex is very difficult. It's not sort of a SaaS platform you migrate between different sort of borders very easily, just turn on a new geo overnight. It's a lot of complexity in data flows, regulation that needs to do that. So we postponed our plans for international expansion until we absolutely, utterly get to that size and scale here in Australia, where it makes sense to do that. And the other things that we come to learn in the temptation to go international is that it's not just the technology localization, it's the headspace. It's the executive team and function. What are they going to be focused on? Diluting your focus between 2 or 3 different geos. And we're just not at that sort of size and scale yet to consider a new geo. And the problem is just so big in Australia. So we've just said, we're absolutely nutty doubling down in this market because we feel like we've got a right to play here, and we want to go from where we are now, which is 600,000 downloads, to why can't it be 5 million or 10 million? That's our view.
I love it. I love the focus, and I love the thinking behind that decision making. Like, that makes a ton of sense. So yeah, that really resonates. I saw a talk you gave once, or I can't remember if it was relation to Switch My Loan or WeMoney, but what came out of it was this real focus you have on team and company culture. And I'm really curious to dive into that more. It's something Don and I talk a lot about and spend a lot of time helping their portfolio co's with. But first of all, how do you define culture and how do you think about it? And then really keen to unpack the the techniques for creating and maintaining a good culture?
Oh, it's such a great question, Aaron. And it's all got me really excited actually to join today's podcast, to be honest, because like nobody talks about it to the degree they probably should. And ultimately, culture is everything. If you don't have a solid culture in a business, it's the kind of make or break of a company's success, I feel, and also for longevity as well. So if you think about all the great companies and all the things that they stand for, if you think about Amazon's approach to day zero and how that gets reinforced 25 years later, that doesn't come from a poster in a lunchroom, right?
No.
That is the essence of the operating system of that company and the expectations and the reinforcement of that company culture day in, day out. And that permeates through every single decision that you make. And I think that it doesn't get discussed enough, but it is, I feel, probably the most important foundational aspects to any business. And yeah, we've taken a very purposeful approach about building that culture, and the way that we do that practically, that's the sort of theoretical stuff, pie in the sky, but concretely on the ground is that WeMoney is essentially run by what we call 17 leadership principles. And these 17 leadership principles guide our decision-making. And we actually celebrate those 17 different leadership principles, either quarterly or half yearly, with our team members, and reinforce the things that people achieve within WeMoney that reinforce as one of those core principles that mean the world to us. That's been a massive unlock. And yeah, I actually learned a lot from Don about this, because Don, you gave a tour around the operating system of the company, right? And you talked about the foundational layer of how culture is so important to businesses. And that really solidified in my mind that the culture you create is the performance that you get. And if you don't focus on that very purposely and intently, you'll get things like you'll focus on the wrong things. You'll develop cancerous sort of cells within the organization that can bubble up and chew you later on. I've become very purposeful about the culture of WeMoney almost from the very sort of inception.
And where you see other founders in the ecosystem, what do you think they misunderstand about building a strong culture, or where do you see they go wrong? Is it a time allocation thing, or they don't give it, or they don't have a process to follow, or?
I think it's process understanding. And I think also as well is the EQ muscle. If you're a young founder in your 20s, right, and you haven't managed people before, you haven't seen the variety of different circumstances and outcomes that humanity has to offer you, right?
That's a good way of putting it.
Yeah, that humanity has to offer.
Then it's very hard to have reference points, anchor points about what to do or not to do. And so you're more likely to make a lot of mistakes like we all do. But I find it much more challenging. I see a lot of these issues that are no fault of the as standards, simply just at bad enough, runs on the board or at back in their circumstances to develop the muscle to then guide culture very successfully. And so I think number one, Don, there's an underemphasis on culture generally in the community. I feel like it's the afterthought of company creation. It's more about, hey, sign of the prize, $1 billion markets, packed in LTV metrics. But I think the best founders and the legendary founders prioritize culture above probably anything else.
Yeah. And one of the things we talk about a lot in the context of culture is conflict and the management of conflict. So when you have conflict between team members or divisions or whatever, what's your approach to identifying and then resolving those conflicts?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think I had this knack I've developed is that you can see problems emerging before they get to the crescendo point. And what I try and do is become very mindful about interaction with different team members, understanding the contextual and the environment they're currently in, how they interact together to get probably the best outcome. I'm not saying I'm like any good at this, but what I've come to realize is that trying to avoid conflict from manifesting is probably the far easier solution than allowing the conflict to occur. I think my team is probably best placed to answer this question, but there's been a few sort of issues on the conflict side here at WeMoney, but I would like to say that it is a generally sort of conflict-free environment. Then maybe that's sort of a good thing for them being in that sort of way. And the way that we try and avoid conflict in the first place is that high contextual understanding of what we're trying to do, high awareness, high alignment, and high buy-in. You need to have all those ingredients about pursuing to do anything. So WeMoney does 2 pop releases a week. So a Tuesday and a Thursday, right? So the engineering team have got two sort of high stress events on a Tuesday and Thursday. We don't ask the engineering team to sneak in anything on a Tuesday and Thursday. Why? Because that adds unnecessary stress when they've already got a highly stressful event on, right? Our sales and partnerships team will typically perform a lot of their early engagement on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. So I know that I'm not going to go and start giving a highly cognitive complex task on those days. So be very mindful about what the team is working on, what they've got to execute, to then allow them to streamline their week to get the things they need to get done. And I think the other parts is that there's one piece of conflict that occurred that essentially was a sort of a clash of two different perspectives, two different sort of views in the world. And I called 15 people, I got all this advice, and at the end of the day, what ended up solving this was actually getting them both together in Perth, in the same environment, working together side by side. Because when you don't make people for the first time, misconceptions, your mind runs when you're in a remote workplace and you don't know this contextual factors. And then we came all together. We went out on a big hiking trip up in the Perth Hills. I got to break a bit of a sweat as a team together. Got the beer and chicken palmy at the end of that, building up all those things. And that's what sort of got those two people together. So I think all the textbooks I read about conflict resolution, have party A talk about their problem, have party B talk about their problem. Or, I don't know, for some reason that didn't gel with me. I experimented with what my gut told me, and my gut said, I actually think these guys need to get into a room together.
Yeah.
I can tell you that beer and palmy has like 92% success rate. So
It'd make a great title for a book on company culture.
yeah. But I think there's a real intent there.
Yeah.
And for the listeners, Dan's culture isn't just evolving happenstance or randomly.
Right.
There is a leader there that is saying, this is what I want. I think you'll find that you do actually have more conflict than you think. But because you are presiding over a culture of what I can see as high trust and respect because of what you're doing, I think you'll find that any conflict is becoming very constructive very quickly. Different perspectives are able to come together, but it's then not manifesting into the destructive version of conflict
Yes.
a lot of people
right.
get. And what we try and tell founders is that the conflict is inevitable, but the way to harness that conflict is trust and respect. And if you think of trust and respect and alignment, just doing things of right, let's go for a hike, or we've got to get people together, or just you've got a process there. Tuesdays and Thursdays, forget about it for the engineering team. That's a systemic process that stops trust and respect being hurt. Because if you didn't have that and someone randomly flew something in on the Tuesday that then put the fox amongst the chickens, that's going to cause a problem to trust and respect. Whereas you're structurally bringing in healthy systems. And I think that's just so important for founders to understand that you can't just white knuckle it with gut feel. You need to bring in some systemic stuff like what Dan's done.
Yeah. And especially because a lot of that is counter to the natural entrepreneurial state, which is it's 5 seconds to midnight and nothing is moving fast enough. And if my team can't keep up with me, that's on them. Like there is this natural tendency of the entrepreneur to want to sprint at things and overload. And
I totally get that. Yeah, I really liked that, Aaron. That's where my sort of real transformation came. Probably only the last sort of 3-4 months. It was this another founder, Intercom, was sort of saying is
Des?
I can't remember his name, but basically he said that fast gets good before good gets fast.
Yes, I listened to that same podcast on the weekend.
I just really listen to it.
It's Des Trainer.
Yes,
And
that's it. Yes,
Yeah. No, that is a great podcast. We'll put that in the links. That's where Jason, what's his name, did a thing with him. That's a really good one.
Jason Calacanis did a thing with you.
Yes. Yeah. And the saying, I guess, from the school of Navy SEALs is that slow is smooth is fast. And that's the other sort of thing is that when you have systems and processes that are lubricated, you don't get increased velocity. And the instinct from a founder, and this what I've learned is that it's so painful to even experiment with that because you're going to sacrifice maybe the 4 weeks spin up time to get the process in place. And then you get the benefit afterwards. And that's what I think big in our business is that sort of more methodical sort of release cycle. And we've ended up becoming faster. Our velocity actually increased and also quality because they're the two sort of main sort of issues and challenges that most standard sort of CEOs or exec teams have to grapple with is that you always have to choose the dial. Do you choose speed over quality or quality over speed? And I'm looking to use that. You can get both, but if you do it right with the process.
I would say you get both. That analogy there is so important. the lubricant to run on, in my view, the biggest lubricant is that trust and respect. If you can have that sloshing around your organization, your ability to move fast is quite incredible. But you find me an organization with destructive conflict, i.e. low trust and respect, people arguing, people not working together, factions, you'll find a company that's not moving fast.
Yeah.
Let's say. And so one thing you mentioned before, you got some advice. What's the best bit of advice you've ever gotten? And in contrast, what's the crappiest piece of advice you've ever gotten as a founder?
This piece of advice. I've got a mentor of mine who he's a down I never had. And he, over the years when I first met him, he was a hard charging sort of guy, very direct to the point. Just tell me how it is. No warm up. There's no shit sandwich being developed here. Bang, there it is. And it's up to you how you take it. And I think over the years is that things that he told me was probably more on the sort of capital raising side is that getting around done as quick as you can, because those things can elongate and actually suck up so much energy and headspace. And as a founder, you obviously want to raise as much as you can and go and develop the product, but there has to be a natural point where you can do a fundraise, collect the amount of interest that there is, and then move on. Because if you keep fundraising and keep hoping for more of an outcome, that's actually, you're eating into away of a precious resource that you currently use, which is time. And so what he taught me actually was the measurement of time, but the value of time, especially a venture-backed business where there is a 7 to 10 year horizon. And that for me was pretty powerful because, as you guys know, fundraisers don't get a plan 9 times out of 10. Things that you start off with to how you want fundraisers to go to what it ends up being are two completely different things. I've become totally comfy with that now. Before it was like, damn, we didn't quite get there, like 100K short or whatever, and you kill yourself because it's not that round number. But you know what? 100K, value of time.
Yeah.
What's your 100K worth, right?
Absolutely.
You're going to spend another 3-4 weeks trying to get that additional capital, would you waste the chance of velocity of moving forward? So that's probably the best piece of advice that I got. In terms of the worst advice, I don't know how you guys feel, but I'm at the stage right now where like I've overloaded on like startup advice. I can't listen to a lot of advice anymore because it's all fairly generic, because it's all the same stuff, just rehashed in a different way. But the sort of the bad advice, I think, rather than actually say what the bad advice is, the advice that I resonate with the most is when I listen to other investors that are operators or have been operators before, right? Because there's sort of 2 different types of investors, I feel, and each have their own benefit to a different type of founder. But the one that resonates with me the most is people that have actually been in the trenches to know what it is to run a business and a company and to try and get that to scale. Because they're going to come at the investment lens from a completely different point of view. They're more likely to help you in the day-to-day tactical operational items rather than hearing and recycling secondhand, third-hand stories from the public. I'm just still going to a degree. But when you have somebody that has been in your shoes before, experienced the same amount of pain, has been at that crucible moment 3 or 4 times personally, I find those people that are on our cap table in particular give us the best piece of advice. And that's what I got from Don's story is Don was an operator before, right? He knew what it was like to operate a business. He knew what it was like to go through all those issues before at scale. And I feel like that's probably the missing piece for me is that your operator investors probably need to create more content and probably attract that operator sort of fans that wants to speak to them. And otherwise, a lot of investors may just be new from a simple prism of just being an IRR. It's like, okay, where are you in the IRR spectrum? Are you going to return my funds? Or is this going to be nice? I think that's my hopefully uncynical view of the amount of advice that is out there. I think just founders, be cautious. When you receive advice, you've got to cherry pick. Nothing is ever true. It's what's true for your situation, for your business at your time, because that is completely different from all the other companies that have come before you.
Yeah.
I think I would have said it when we were talking in WA, but I always start off with all models are wrong. Some are just a little bit useful.
Yeah.
And we've got to be careful not to think that the secret sauce lives in each of these. And yes, because where Aaron and I have been operators, we're probably biased towards the operational side, but our genuine view is that if you can build a healthy cultures have high trust and respect. High trust and respect can move fast. When you move fast, you can solve problems quicker than your competitors, which means you can grow bigger, which means you have the chance to return our fund.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's the sequence that we look in. And by concentrating on those in that right sequence, whereas too often, I think you're right, the investment lens is just, will you return my fund? Yeah, that's the manifestation. That's the outcome of helping on all those other ingredients.
Yeah. Yeah. We definitely see
Yeah.
it. There's investors. It's the startup is packaged as a financial product, but yeah, everything you just said
Rather than
really resonates. I'm just curious, where else do you draw your kind of influence from? And one thing I'm picking up just hearing you talk more and more, Dan, is the EQ aspect of what you bring to what you do. Like, where did that come from, and what other influences do you have? What are your sources of truth and knowledge?
Question, Aaron. This is a really frightening to say, but I'm school of hard knocks. Growing up, in an environment where it was fight or flight every day, right? So you learn a lot about human behavior where you're in an environment, a very formative part of your life, where you need to make decisions very quickly, and you need to also assess threats, dangers, and opportunities. And I say that because the suburb I grew up in at a young formative age was pretty rough and tough. And you get to know a lot about human very quickly. And I think that's probably where the genesis comes from, but where the curiosity, I think, is more sparked. Probably came a little bit later in life, where essentially around the sort of topic of behavioral science and economics, because once you fundamentally understand the natural human drivers, and I'm talking going way back into like as esoteric as like 100,000 years ago, and looking at more early reasons why the brain developed in the way that it did, you generally find patterns in human behavior that have lasted for centuries. And for me today, the wisdom doesn't come from books that were written last year. Actually, the pool of information and understanding about human behavior comes from the classics. It comes from the Roman Empire. It comes from early antiquity, and it over multiple thousands of years is essentially the same things that happen to humanity, the same issues and challenges of leadership that have pervaded for like thousands of years. And the
same patterns.
Yeah, different data, that's correct. And I think for me is that the beauty about history, I'm really enamored by this one historian. His name is Niall Ferguson. I'm not sure if you guys have heard of him, but he wrote a book called The Ascent of Money. Essentially, it's about behavioral science and economics, but he's a economic historian, and a lot of his books and podcasts and shows that he talks about human behavior being a massive driver of certain outcomes. And I think there's a pool of untapped opportunity there for people to understand a lot more, because if you can understand and unlock that, if you know what is predictable, what happened in the past, you can then predict what might happen in the future. And to that earlier point about preempting sort of issues before they come, a lot of that, I think, a lot of those tools and frameworks that I've learned from have come from being interested in sort of in history. And the other thing is also Twitter, or now X, where you want to get really heterodox views that aren't people promoting themselves in a certain way, in a certain light that can be vulnerable and controversial, because that's where you get the melting pot of ideas and general honesty and different views that you don't get in other mediums. That's where I spend the little spare time I have lurking and reading stuff.
And so there's a lot of reflection there on history and things that you can learn from patterns. How do you view self and self-management? And as a founder, when we're in the trenches and you've got so many things coming at you, what's your approach to managing self and those reactions and all of that shit that the human condition seems to bestow on us?
Books. It's been an evolution in the journey to do that, become more self-aware. I'm mid-30s now, and I'm a dad with a 6-year-old, and I tell you what, having a 2-year life, mate, teaches you a lot about humanity and patience and everything else. I think actually when my son was born, that kind of led a lot actually from him, because I saw myself in him. And I saw how I acted in front of my son, I got back. And then for me, the kind of dawned on me is that if I were to instill really good behaviors and values in my son, then I could be a certain way I have to present myself and have those every single micro interaction actually count. People think that it's a big thing. It's the all hands meeting or something like that. You know, it's not. I've learned, this may be wrong, but what I've learned is that every single interaction that you have actually is a reference point for somebody on who you are. And so
100%.
Yeah. If you develop all those reference points for some people, then they develop trust because they know they can then predict what you're going to do. And then to Don's point, if you want a highly trusted environment, is be predictable.
Yeah.
And if you're predictable, then essentially you're going to get things that you probably want done. I think the times, of course, where every sort of founder, operator, or executive team goes through issues and challenges. I think for me is that the thing that I've learned is that you never celebrate the things in excess. So for us, fundraising events are a means to an end. Yet it's nice for an article here or there and to give that sort of attention. But for us, it's an obligation. It's a responsibility to actually act on the money that we've been provided by other people to execute the plan and vision of the wrong. So I think it's focusing on the right things to celebrate on and not commiserating too much into your depths of stuff that's going wrong, because that too shall pass. If you get too caught up in the negative cycle loops, you get yourself into a negative state and compounds and it gets you in the wrong way. Yes, I release that. Go hiking is a huge release, like getting yourself outside the environment, very important. But that's the biggest thing I learned. I can force myself to be in front of the computer for another 2 hours, but that ends up with me making a wrong decision or a low quality decision. Okay, time to actually, let's get out of here. Let's go spend some time just thinking and then actually recharge the batteries to go and tackle those problems again.
There's so much gold in what you just said. I think the power of consistency in terms of consistency behavior and persistent behavior in terms of building trust. And then that last piece about, I always refer to it as suspending reality, but extracting yourself from the doing to actually go and do something like a hike or be in nature or whatever almost mindfulness practice you have, so that you can actually ruminate on something, empower the subconscious to take over with its computational power and free up that frontal cortex. And you just come back with so much more clarity to be able to, like, your cognitive thinking ability, your decision making is enhanced for it. And so going back to some of those comments before, it is slowing down to go faster and the quality that comes from that.
Yeah. What I like on some work I've been doing recently is the concept of making sure that authenticity is the guiding principle. When you're in those little moments where you've got to make a decision of either taking the easy way out, easy decisions, hard life, hard decisions, easy life kind of thing. If authenticity is that central thing, life tends to work out a little harder. And everything I've heard here is that you're just very authentic towards your customers, to your culture, to your people, and to yourself. And I think there's a lot people can learn from that, to really commend you for it.
Oh, thank you, Don. That's a lot of kind words. The only other thing that's come to mind now, which could be helpful, is that it's also the people that also come into the organization and their profiles. Because one thing that I've also picked up along the way is that there's generally two buckets of people. There's your sort of missionaries and your mercenaries. I'm sure you guys have heard this before. It's been done to death, but I can't unscore your thoughts of that one, because if somebody joins WeMoney, we would rather preference somebody that is very values aligned to what we're doing, had experienced the problem themselves, or has a very close family member that's been through that problem. So it's very relatable, something that actually has affected them before. Because if they've been through that problem and challenge themselves throughout their life, when they then feel empowered to be part of the solution, when there's issues and problems in a business, they're not going to be the one that push the eject seat and get out of a plane, because those people will come to pass and just work at an organization. They might be there for the brand or whatever else in their own career. That's totally fine. People go do all that. But the people that we over-index on, individuals that meet those core cultural fit criteria, and we're willing to sacrifice experience for cultural fit. Because if you give somebody that is infinitely curious, has the passion and the hunger to find a problem, they can learn everything that those other people who are mercenaries who have acquired that skill set and do a much better job in terms of the quality of output of the final product and feature that they really care about what they deliver. So I don't know if that was useful, but that's ways. Yeah.
It is. There's a thing that TEC, talent, experience, culture.
Yeah.
And culture actually has to be the number one. Then talent, like can this person, and experience, in my view, should always be last.
Yeah.
Because if you've got the right cultural fit and someone that's got a bit of talent, you can teach them.
Yep.
They'll pick it up if they're hungry for it. But too often, especially in the early stages, we need this kind of person. So they hire for experience, and the C that they get is not culture. They get cancer.
Yeah.
And that is not what you want. So yeah, I totally agree. And one of the questions I was going to ask you was, what would you tell your younger self the year before you started this business? What are some of the lessons? I think the last hour has been a whole lot of those lessons, but are there any things that you'd say, tap yourself on the shoulder and say, buddy, this is probably a different way to do it, or a lesson you're about to learn?
The thing I reflect on the most, Don and Aaron, is that in the early days of WeMoney in particular, because prior to that, the first startups, which by the way, that was all bootstraps. That was like literally monthly room to exit to a listed company. And I had no experience with it, just made for myself. And so I had to learn that sort of skill from scratch. And I think the biggest lesson that I had is that I always felt to a degree, maybe self-conscious about our particular very dogged belief about what the future should be. And if you didn't believe in that vision, I tried to educate people to maybe see that perspective of that vision, how they could come to life. And a lot of the time that would not work. And I used to feel quite bad about that. Hey, there's something with me, is something that's wrong. And what I've realized over time is that I've just got a lot more confident in myself and also our team and what we can create and execute on. And now when I go into like investor conversations, I come in there as an equal and not as somebody that is, oh, hey, we just give us some money, we can go execute this vision. The thing that I look for now that I've developed a confidence in is that when we're in that capital raising discussion, it's about a partnership together as equals, not as here's some money, please go and execute and make sure this thing works. And that will be a very long time to get to that point.
Yeah, such a good lesson. Mate,
and that self-confidence, and I know that we got to jump off shortly and we're very appreciative for your time, but I'm just wondering, in that circle of self-confidence, was there just a reality of experiences that you needed to have and a few mistakes along the way, but then you taught yourself that you were able to bounce back and the flywheel built up, or that you could have had a different perspective on it?
The battering ram of having
Like, what's the
100 brutal conversations, in total, and then just figuring out, you just got to do it.
You just got to do it. And so for founders listening, it's just part of the course. And I think it may have been in that Des Trainer podcast or maybe a different one, but it was like, I've had 10 investor convos and they all said no. Yeah, okay, we got 90 to go.
Yeah.
It's 100.
Yeah, that's why I'm just 10 now is that I think you can find it pretty quickly in maybe the first 10 minutes if there is strong resonance between you and the investor. It's going to come out fairly naturally. Very quickly, you're going to find that sort of common thread that you're going to pick on very quickly. And that please double down on it. That chemistry isn't there in that first conversation, pre-conversation, email. You can generally tell where the content might go. And you might surprise yourself. You're always going to have to shot on goal, but I think you can generally tell pretty quickly if conversation is like very aligned to what you're doing and what the investors looking for as well. So it only happens with doing the 100, mate, or the 200 or the 300. You got to go through that.
Mate, this has been fantastic. This is exactly why I wanted you on there. You just, the focus on culture, that absolute passion for your customers is just, most founders are passionate for their customers, don't get me wrong, but you seem to have a real mission.
Yeah. A real clear,
you're trying with.
Yeah, real clear vision and just that emotional connection with the customer. But yeah, everything you've described about team and culture and the way you approach that, this has been, a really fantastic conversation. Really appreciative of your time.
Well, thanks, Don. Thanks, Aaron. It's such a pleasure to be with you guys. And I love what you guys are doing. And I think there needs to be more people like you guys in Australia talking about this in this very sort of relaxed setting without the sort of, pretense and anything like that. Because you're going to get the real honest conversation out, more people will learn about, because that people connect with, what I mean. I think the reason why a company like Harry Stebbings has become so successful is because you actually have a conversation like a human being. And when you do that, you're going to unlock your thoughts, and people can now snip polish from a mile away, and they don't want it. They want just real stuff that occurs that people can learn from, because then you're going to get cut through. So I think you guys are flying that flag on the top of the mountain in Australia. And so we'll go into you both and what Tribe stands for. It's amazing. And I'm looking forward to following your journey.
I appreciate that. And when we're down, we're going to get to Perth at least 3 times this coming year. As I said before, we're coming in, we're going to put quite a bit of effort in there because we just think there's a great ecosystem occurring there. Founders like yourself probably aren't getting as much of that capital flow as required. Although Dan tells me the first institutional VC in was Dan Gavel.
Oh, great. Awesome. Oh, that's really good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Funnily enough, I was just on a call with WA government just before around the investment landscape over there. But yeah, it's somewhere we want to be spending a lot more time because there just are great founders such as yourself.
Well, I think that's probably just true for digital Australia and the different pockets of the country which are underrepresented. And I think a lot more people are seeing that opportunity now. Yeah, I think it's going to get better for the Queensland-based founders, South Australian founders, Tassie founders, WA, NT, all around, and to spread what I guess Victoria, New South Wales have learned for a number of years and make the system stronger. So I'm excited for that. water gods.
Yeah. Dan, look forward to seeing you down there in 2024.
Yes.
Congrats on what you've built. If it was easy, everyone would do it. But you've
Thanks,
done
guys.
good.
Yeah. Looking forward to a beer and palmy with you
And a hike.
when we're over.
Yeah. Beer party in a
Oh,
walk.
guys. Thanks, Ed. Cheers.
All right.
See ya.
Bye.
Thanks, mate.